Alright guys, I'm going to start video 1 of a little mini-series on how to run the Airbus according to procedures. I am an Airbus pilot in North America right now, working for a major North American airline. I know procedures differ from carrier to carrier, country to country. You know, out in Europe they've got some different terminologies and procedures that they do out there. So if that's a problem for you, then I really don't care. I'm going to try to keep these videos on the shorter side and more as much as informative as informative as I can, I guess. Anybody who flies the Airbus knows that there's always something to learn about the Airbus. We're not all experts on it, so if I seem to misunderstand something or something is not right or as you understand it, let me know. I'd love to hear about it and we can figure it out together. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. I'm using the Flight Factor A320 Ultimate. I'm right here in Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. We're going to be doing a flight to Phoenix, Arizona. It's actually the flight I'm going to be doing here in just about 3 hours. So I'm just doing the first part of this video, get us started, how to get the aircraft up and ready. So first thing that happens is when the crew arrives at the aircraft, first thing we want to do is get electrical power to the aircraft. So typically where I work, we've got ground power readily available, so let's go ahead and get that fired up. The chocks would be in place, and as the crew walks to the airplane, it's actually my job as a first officer as I walk up to the aircraft to make sure take note, the aircraft chocked, make sure the flaps are up, nothing funny going on with the airplane, to get into the flight deck and go ahead and establish electrical power. So what we want to do first is up here on the overhead panel, you notice we've got our 2 battery switches. Airbus operates on a lights out methodology. So if the lights are out, it's on or it's active. It's a good sign, basically. But to tell if the batteries are on, an easy way to do that is to look at your landing gear annunciator lights. So right now we've got no lights here in the landing gear annunciator. So let's go up here and go ahead and turn on our batteries. Got battery 1. Now that you see battery 1 is on, we can power the off light for battery 2. Battery 2 comes on. And we've got landing gear annunciator lights as well as some other things. The IESS is powering up. And an emergency floodlight if we turn that on. So we have external power. Let's go ahead and fire that up. And typically these positions will be, we'll set these switches to where they would be. Nav 1 or 2, there's 2 nav lights in each wingtip in case one burns out for redundancy. We use it for whoever's flying. So if the captain's flying, we'll keep it on 1. If the first officer's flying, we'll put it on 2. I'll operate this flight as the captain, so we'll keep it on 1 for now. The beacon is off, wing lights off, everything else is off. That's good. Seatbelts off for now. And what we would do is we'd go ahead and turn on the ground control recorder that would record all of our communications prior to engine start. That's not modeled here in the 320 as of yet. We'll go ahead and get our initial reference system aligning. We've got IR1, IR2, and IR3. We typically go 1, 2, and then 3. Every time we switch it to nav, we want to make sure this on battery light comes on and extinguishes for the respective IR unit. That is so we know that the aircraft will revert to battery power should we lose our generators, things like that. We'll go ahead and we're going to be using the APU, so we'll do a APU fire test here. I know when I move the screen, sometimes we get weird stutters on OBS, so I'll try to minimize that. We got our discharge light, annunciators, engine fire, that looks good. So we can go ahead and, you know what, we're not going to power it up. We'll stay here on ground power for now. Alright. At this point, what I would do is I would get the weather. We don't have an ATSU system modeled yet in the Flight Factor 320. There is a lot of things in this module that aren't modeled, which those of you who know me know my opinions on Flight Factor and how they do things in their business model. But with that being said, I don't necessarily agree with how they operate. They have given us an aircraft that if you just want to hop in and do a flight from A to B, normal procedures, it's pretty much the best systems-wise we got in Xplane at the moment. You can see that flipped off there. So I would get the weather. We'd pull it up through here, and I'd print it out, and I would get the destination weather as well. But since we don't have that, we'll just skip that step. And then, of course, in real life, I would now hop out and go do a pre-flight inspection. I'm not going to do a full pre-flight with you guys here, but, you know, we start out in front of the aircraft, make sure the static zone is clear. You know, we check our landing gear, our engine nacelle covers, and all that stuff. I'm sorry, not nacelle covers, but engine nacelle latches. There's 2 latches under the engines. We are required to recheck them on each flight. If maintenance needs to open the aircraft cowling for any reason and change oil or whatever, these latches come undone, and it is imperative that those latches stay closed, or else you can risk catastrophic failure or something like that when the engine's running. So big thing we check there. We would check, there's a couple of vents underneath the wing here. Kind of hard to tell. I don't have the best camera moving software, but under here there's some vents. There's one for the fuel tank. There's an overflow for the fuel tank as well, and there's also a strobe light cooling vent here. So as the aircraft is moving, it allows air to come in. It's a NACA style duct, and it will let air pass through the light compartment up there on the wingtip to keep it nice and cool. Got our static wicks, wingtip vents, you know, come around, check our landing gear, make sure there's no hydraulic fluid leaking, nothing abnormal. Right here, this is our APU. Disregard that, it's not. This is our APU over here, inlets over here. This is outflow, the pack outflow, which is open right now. Here's the APU outlet, obviously. Elevator looks good. As we're walking around the aircraft, as a first officer, you always want to make sure that the elevator is reset to 0, which you can see it's reset to 0 right there. Make sure all the other panels are closed. Stay away from the lav service door so you don't have lavatory waste dripping on you as you walk underneath it. And back into the cockpit. We are. We have a nav TCAS fault. That is normal. Making sure everything is normal here. This would be in standby mode. Everything would be in standby. Typically for us, before we get an assigned squat code from air traffic control, we'll have it set at 2000 to remind us that we still need to get that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the box. What we're going to do tonight is KDFW to Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to go as Flight Factor Flight 320. Be our call sign. Cost index 99. Cost index, very simply put, is how efficient does the company run the aircraft. You want to go faster, burn more fuel, or save fuel and fly a little bit slower. So I'm not paying for gas right now, so let's go ahead, cost index 99. Our cruise altitude tonight, and I'm pulling this straight off the flight plan that I'm going to be flying here in just about 3 hours. Cruise altitude for tonight's flight is 360. Apologies. Now, we would also get a actual temp. This is temperature at 360 based on a standard conversion with a dry ambiotic lapse rate. I believe I'm saying that right? Ambiotic lapse rate. Whatever the actual air temp is, we would have that in our flight plan, which I obviously don't have right now, and change it. Typically, it's a few degrees warmer, so for all intents and purposes, let's just say the actual temperature at that flight level is -40. So we can go ahead and put that in there. All right. Let's go ahead and start programming the flight plan. So we have align IRS. This is a something that would happen when you get to cold and dark aircraft. We do need to align on ref. Right now we're at Dallas-Fort Worth. We'll go ahead and I'll make sure it aligns on ref, that we get the alignment process going. You can see align in 1 minute there. All right. Flight plan. Let's go ahead and start from our departure. We're going to take off runway 35 left this morning, or this evening. And off of 35 left, we're taking the West Tex 2 departure. We don't have a transition associated with that, or else we'd have it right there. Let's go ahead and insert that. And I made a mistake. We should be in plan mode. That way we kind of keep track of what's going on here as we input the box. So we can see this. Alright, so that's our departure procedure. We're into our flight plan. We're going to go to SICAN. After SICAN, we're going to Echo Whiskey Mike. Followed by driver, Delta Romeo, Romeo, Victor Romeo. Now you can insert these as you go along. Typically that's a good idea, just in case you make a mistake. You don't want to delete everything that you've inputted or already input. I'm not sure if inputted is a word. Or you can wait till the very end. The problem is if you wait till the very end and you made a mistake and you go back, hit erase, you've just erased everything that you've inputted. There I go, I said it again. That you have input into the McDo. So either way works. Or a driver, and then that's going to lead us into the arrival for Phoenix, which I'm not sure what runway we're going to get, but typically this time of night we're going to land going eastbound. Actually, let's say this. Last time I did this flight last week, we landed going west, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the ILS to runway 25 right, and actually we did 25 left. I remember it was a much shorter runway, so we'll do 25 left. And I said the arrival was the ping 1 arrival. So let's scroll down to the ping 1. No transition associated with that as well. Insert, hit the flight plan key. Every time you hit flight plan, it will automatically bring you to the top of your flight plan. If you hit the airport key, it'll bring you to the bottom of your flight plan. So we're flight plan mode. I'll bring this up here so we can see it a little bit better. And I'll put our range at 20. Now to step through your flight plan, you want to make sure that you are in plan mode. So we have our navigation display here. We can filter it whatever we want. Typically the most commonly used are ARC and plan. Plan is how we sift through our flight plan. So we're starting here at Dallas-Fort Worth, coming off the departure. Oops. Let me activate the constraints as well so we can see our restrictions as we depart. We'll come out here on the departure procedure, all the way out. Driver, now you can see that there's a discon, or discontinuity, between driver and ping. That happens sometimes when we don't have a transition on the arrival. You notice when I loaded in the ping 1 arrival, there was no transition to select. So when that happens, we get a discon here. This is accurate and to the real aircraft, so let's go ahead and clear that out, insert it. A got you for the Airbus is, let's say we go ahead and change our arrival runway to 7 left now, insert it, take off, we're flying along, hunky-dory, no problems. Well, guess what? We get the driver again. We didn't clear out that discount again, so now we have no fix after driver. So it's imperative that you are constantly checking your flight plan. Well, not constantly checking, but you want to be aware of when you make changes to your flight plan, what are you changing? How is it going to affect your flight plan down the line, not just where you are right now? So let's go ahead and we'll clear that discontinuity. And I actually erased the arrival, so let me go ahead and throw that all back in there. You can see this is why there's two of us in the cockpit to make sure we don't make these mistakes. That's why I selected no star. Ping 1, insert. Now, third time's the charm. There's our discon after driver. You can see it. Boom. We've fixed that. I'm going to zoom the range in a little bit here so we can see the fixes on the arrival. Magenta, 13,250 knots. Purple all the way in to Phoenix Sky Harbor International. Alright, once our flight plan is up, next thing we're going to do is our secondary. Secondary flight plan for the flight sim world, typically not that important. For the real world, it's extremely important. The reason being is if we lose an engine on departure, we want to be able to have a return runway and approach available at the push of a button and not have to worry about programming this box while flying the airplane with an engine out. So to do our secondary flight plan, we're going to do our departure airport and our arrival airport. Now if you have a takeoff alternate, for those of you that know what that means, obviously you would probably put your takeoff alternate in your secondary flight plan. A takeoff alternate would be as if we're departing with extremely low visibility and we don't have the visibility requirements to get back into our departure airport and something goes wrong, we need to get back on the ground, then we would put that airport in this box here. But since Dallas-Fort Worth is capable of Cat 3 Autoland, we don't have to worry about that right now. So we do a round-robin flight plan, Dallas to Dallas. Hit the secondary flight plan key again. Now we're going to load up what we want to do. So we want to do an approach back in here, right? Typically, we pick the longest runway available that you would most likely get had you have to have an emergency. So I know just from being based here, 3-5 left is what I want to come back in on. We don't have to put an arrival on. You just put in the runway. And then you go back to secondary. And now we want to put in the performance numbers. We don't need takeoff information here in the secondary. All we care about is approach information for the secondary flight plan. And this is, you can do this two ways. You can use the ATIS or whatever weather information you have. What I like to do is I like to take what is the aircraft telling me, right? Because the less conservative numbers that I put in here, the more conservative numbers I'm going to get from the computer. So if the ATIS is telling me it's 10 degrees, but my TAT out here on the ground, I'm sorry, the SAT is saying 14 degrees, I'm going to go 14 degrees just because that's what the airplane's feeling. It's real life right now. ATIS might be an hour old. You never know. So for all intents and purposes, I don't know what the altimeter is. Let's just say it's 2992. Temperature, I'm reading it right off here off my lower ECAM. You can see it's 14 degrees. And the wind, last I checked, it was 350 at 7. Now you can leave that blank if you want to get more performance. You can leave it 0 for 0, whatever you want. You don't have to change this by default in North America. This is 18,000 feet, not 180,000 feet. All right, and then we would look at our chart for Dallas-Fort Worth and put in our MDA. I'm going off of my memory. I don't know if it's 767 or not, but our minimum descent altitude for our approach on 3-5 left is going to be right here. So I know it's 767 for 17 right, coming the other way, but we'll leave that at that. So that's our secondary. It just got really dark. Let's change that, shall we? Let's back it up. There we go. Alright, so our secondary flight plan is completed, and you can actually see it here on your plan view as well. It is the white flight plan on your ND. Alright, so secondary is completed. Now we go to the RadNav page. Now I'm going through these buttons in a series that we do every single time, and you may be familiar with it, called diffsrip. It's DIFSSSRIPP. So basically this was our data page initialization when we used the initialize the flight plan. Our flight band key is F. We hit secondary once to initialize it. We hit secondary again to select an approach, and we hit secondary a third time to put in our performance data for the approach. So that's why there's 3 S's. Now we go to the R in diffsrip. The R is radnav. If you're doing a departure that requires you to turn at a certain distance from a certain VOR, we would hard tune a VOR. So I know Maverick VOR, oops, let's go ahead and clear this out. Maverick VOR is Tango, Tango, Tango. If I want to get distance off of that, I can hard tune that there. And I now have Maverick VOR distance information on my ND if I need it. So we'll leave that now. So that was the R, and then diffsrip, there's an I. So we go to our initialization. This is initialization page 2. So here we put our 0 fuel weight and our 0 fuel weight CG. Now, I've been having some issues with this in the Flight Factor Airbus, with it being out of limits and there being issues. The way we do it is we put our 0 fuel weight and we default it at 30.0. Now, I don't know if that's because our fleet is balanced out and it's a safe number to use for that. I'm not exactly sure why we do that. I just know that is what we do. And then after we run our performance data in our McDo, which is this unit, it will auto-populate our actual 0 fuel weight and our actual center of gravity for this aircraft. Since we can't do that through the McDo, we have to use our perf data page here on the EFB, which is something totally new to me. I'm not really familiar with this. I believe we have to come here and hit set or something, and you can see that it is lining up. So I have my CG here is planned at 22.3. That's what I have here. And my 0 fuel weight, 57.6, matches up with right here. Now you can see I'm almost in the aft limits already, so I'm sure you can change this. Go ahead and change this, you know, if we called the boarding, for instance, get our boarding door, and let's go ahead and just say we filled up the airplane, right? And maybe we had different cargo. That actually looks pretty good. What's our fuel load? Yeah, fuel looks pretty good too. So we could do that. Now you can see our CG is shifted. So if we hit set again, yeah, it looks like it changes, 28.6. So that's kind of how you work through this. You want to make sure your CG matches up with the initialization B. It is very important to have this done, because if you don't do it, you're not going to get any performance data. I'm sorry, my dog is going crazy. So just make, and once you start an engine, you will not be able to readjust this figure. Alright, so diffsrip, that was I, and then the last thing, there were 2 P's, is the perf page, or a prog page and then perf page. That's why there's 2 P's at the end. So prog, we typically put our departure, airport, and runway right here, just so we have an extra means of distance and bearing. And then perf data, in our airline, we leave this section blank. I run weight and balance numbers from the gate agents and the ground crew. I run that through our ATSU third-party program, third-party software, not associated with the Airbus. I can't think of the name of the company that our company pays to have them do it, but it basically runs all your takeoff information, all your data, everything that we just put in here, and it will spit out numbers. Very similar to what this happens here, but it will also give us a V1 as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick a random number here. I'm going to say 120. Now the numbers that we get back are significantly more conservative than the numbers that this McDo gives us. Through recent patches, it looks like it's even better. These actually might be a little bit more accurate. I'm not sure what Flight Factor and how they compute these numbers or how they get these numbers. I'm a real world pilot. I'm not too concerned about being exactly right here on this flight sim. As long as I got some numbers that look ballpark figure, I'm good. So this looks good to me. Of course, in North America, we changed it to 18,000 feet. It's actually default in our aircraft. We don't have to change it. It's just a flight simism. And we would also get our required flap setting for takeoff through our performance data. And we would also get our flex number. Now, flex, very simply put, is an assumed temperature for our FADEC and our engines. So if you're familiar with how an engine runs, the higher the density altitude, the higher the temperature, the less performance you're going to get from your engine. To save engine life and preserve wear and tear on an engine, we run flex takeoff numbers. So we are going to tell the computer that controls the engine what temperature we want it to perform at. So if I do flex 50, that means I'm going to get thrust performance as if the outside air temperature was 50 degrees, even though it's clearly 14. So I'm going to get less thrust with this flex number than I would if I did no flex. Now, like I said, we do that just so we can, save the engine life and preserve the engine life, and it's less wear and tear on the engine. There are some times that you will not flex. A couple instances are anytime there's a contaminated runway, if there's water on the runway, snow on the runway, obviously ice or slush. Any contamination, we're not going to flex. If there's wind shear, there's known wind shear in the area, we're not going to flex. Also, if we're taking off with a tail knot, we are permitted up to 10 knot tailwind on departure. If that happens, we are not going to flex. Right now, standard day, everything's looking good. We'll go ahead and flex 50 for our takeoff data. Now, we know that the box is set. We would go ahead and let's go ahead and perform the rest of our, pre-flight, if you will. We want to set the top altitude for our STAR. I'm sorry, not our STAR, our SID, our Standard Instrument Departure Procedure. You can change the dial here to move in hundreds of feet or thousands of feet. Typically, we keep it all in 1,000, move it to 100 if we need it. The top of the departure procedure, I'm not looking at it right now. I wish I was. I'm sorry, I'm charging my work iPad. I got to use it in a couple hours. I'm just going to guess here by looking at my constraints. This is something you would not want to do in an airplane. We don't like guessing. But the way I see it, it almost looks like the top altitude on this departure, well, they got Kmart at or above 5,500. So let's just go with a safe bet. I'm going to say top altitude is 10,000 feet. You'd get that from clearance delivery. They give you your clearance. You say climb via the WestTex 2 departure. Climb via SID, maintain 10,000. Okay, we got 10,000 in the box. Put that back on perf. And they would give us a squawk. So let's go ahead and come up with a squawk code of 1577. 1577. All right. At this point, we can go ahead and run a pre-flight checklist. And we would go ahead and do that. Sorry, I was just looking at something here. All right. Let's go ahead and get the APU fired up. We'll pretend that the fueler has finished fueling. So we'll go ahead and turn our fuel pumps on. We do this before start checklist, before pre-flight checklist. Seatbelt sign now comes on since we're done fueling. And we're getting ready to start our APU. I'm going to do something here that I wanted to mention. So the APU, for the Airbus, there's a master switch and then a start switch. You can see them, they're both right here on the overhead panel. A neat little feature that Flight Factor has implemented is the correct operation of this system. So when we go ahead and power up the APU computer, you would think that we go ahead and just hit the start button. Well, that's incorrect. We can't do that. We need to wait for a flap open message to illuminate here. What happens is when we hit the master power switch on the APU, the computer runs a self-test, and it diagnoses if there's a low oil pressure. I'm sorry, not low oil pressure, low oil quantity. If there's low oil, the only way we're going to find out is if we wait for this flap open message to illuminate here. Obviously, we have no low oil indicator, so we'll go ahead and start. We can go ahead and crank the start switch and power it up. The aircraft, if it does have low oil, it'll say flap open, low oil. At that point, we would have to make a maintenance write-up in the aircraft documentation. I believe it can fly for, I don't know, 10 hours or something with that message before maintenance has to service the APU. So if it does pop up, it's not the end of the world. That's just something we take note of. It's neat to see that Flight Factor has go ahead and modeled that. See your APU spinning up here. It should kick over here to avail. All right. APU power is available. You can tell by the green avail light. Let's go ahead and unhook the external power. And we can go ahead and disconnect the ground power from the aircraft. Alright, now at this point we are ready to run a pre-flight checklist. I'm going to go ahead and turn the APU bleed on. If you're not connected to ground air at the gate, so turn the bleed on, keep the cabin cool, keep the passengers cool. You can hear the pack spinning up, nice little sound. I am using the Blue Sky Studios or VSS sound pack for the Airbus A320. Alright, so our pre-flight checklist would be maintenance log and tail number. We would verify the tail number of the aircraft, and the maintenance log can. Tail number would be over here in the little placard. Maintenance log and tail numbers be onboard and check. Gear pins and covers removed. The signs, that's referring to the cabin signs, are on and auto. I'm trying to do this by memory. Signs on auto. Fuel. You know what? Let me get my checklist. I'll be right back. Hold on. Alright, I'm sorry about that. I wanted to actually get my checklist so I'm not doing it by memory and missing something and being incorrect. So, pre-flight checklist, maintenance log and tail number, onboard and check, gear pins and covers removed, the signs on and auto. Like I said, that refers to the cabin signs. We don't have smoking signs. We keep that in the auto position there. On and auto. ADIRS, verify that that is in nav. Fuel, we would check the required fuel and the onboard fuel right here, 6.9 kilograms. That's definitely not enough fuel to get us to Phoenix. We'll have to change that. Altimeters, check and set 2992, and EFB, our flight bags, which contain our charts and stuff like that. Make sure it's checked. Well, since we'll go ahead and we'll just say we're ready for push here. We'll go ahead and turn the beacon light on, and I would turn the transponder. I know there's a glitch with OBS and it can trip you out there with the Xplane recordings. Let it stabilize here. This would go into auto. We still keep this, I'd keep this in above for now, and we'd keep this in standby, but we want to turn our transponder in auto. Then we verify windows, doors, and slides. They are not closed and armed. So let's fix that. Slides, we are closed and armed. You can see the slide indications telling us that the slides are closed and armed. Beacon light is on. Thrust lever is idle. Parking brake is off for now because we have the chocks. Transponder is in auto. Forced start, checklist complete. So let's go ahead and we'll keep the parking brake set for now. We'll go ahead and remove the chocks. And I'm going to go ahead and I've already pre-planned a pushback. We'll go ahead and call for push. So at this point we'll call up ramp control. Ground Flight Factor 320 request push from Echo 36.
Tow is driving
They would say, alright, Flight Factor 320, you're clear to push. Tail in the alley. Call me back when you're ready for taxi. Nice little Texas sunset there. It's just funny, I used to work for this regional airline over here. This is Republic Airlines, and I've actually have that exact tail number in my logbook, 427 Yankee X-ray. That's pretty funny. That is funny. Also, I should note that I do fly the Airbus with Pratt & Whitney engines. These are CFM. Slightly different. There's a very similar operation, obviously, but there are some subtle differences, such as start times.
All doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
Start times and the way the reversers look and things like that. But yeah, you can tell here on the data page, aircraft status. We have CFM 56 on this aircraft. For me, it would say Pratt & Whitney PW 1100 or whatever the model number is. I should actually probably review that since I got to go back to recurrent in 2 weeks. So. Alright, we're just waiting for the tug driver to hook up, which is very realistic. Typically, we are always waiting for the ground crew. Just twiddling our thumbs at this point in the cockpit, making sure everything is good to go. I'm not actually going to take off with this fuel load. I'm going to go ahead and get ready for work. So the second video will pick up with the taxi checklist. So I'll go ahead and push back, get the engine started, and then that'll be it.
So connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Alright, brakes released, you're clear to push, tail in the alley.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
Alright, he gives us engine start clearance here at the gate. That would be against our company procedures. We need to at least clear the gate area here before we can start the engine. Especially since we start engine number 1 first, typically. There can be a lot of hazards around here, you know, cones and... I mean, there shouldn't be, but it's just part of our procedure. I actually have sucked a cone in an engine Chicago O'Hare. While the engine was still running, a ground crew service member placed a cone down in front of the engine. In and out in a second. Alright, as we go ahead and clear now, we are cleared to start. We're clear of obstructions. Let's go ahead and start engine number 1. So to do that, I'll apologize for the, look at that. I'll apologize for the stuttering there. What we want to do is turn our engine start selector switch into start. You can hear the PAX cease operation. And here we were looking at our start PSI. PSI is at 36. It's a good indication. Let's go ahead and start engine 1. Confusing, isn't it? N2 is rising. And I should have started the clock as well. You always want to know how long your starter is running during an engine start, in case we have to abort the start or if there's an aborted start. There's limitations regarding the starter and how long it can run and how many seconds or minutes are required for a cool down. So that's why you always start the time when you start the engine. These engines start up super quick. The Pratt & Whitneys take about 1 minute and 10 seconds to reach idle from the start. So these are up and running here, and you can hear it tripping breakers already in about not even 30 seconds. Alright, so we actually have a good start on engine number 1. Go ahead and stop the clock. We'll do a 2-engine taxi out. So I would just confirm with the ground crew, hey, is it clear if we start number 2? Typically that second marshaller is walking right over here real lazily right in front of the engine, so you want to make sure that they're clear. So yeah, you go ahead and start number 2. Go ahead and start engine 2. There's our bleed valve opens. See the pressure. Oil pressure is rising slowly. N2's coming up. Now, a good way to tell some guys, you know, what are you looking for? Well, if you're gonna, biggest thing we look for probably is a hot start. If there's a hot start indication, it will be an auto shutdown. The Airbus will actually auto abort the start. And you can always tell if you're going to have a hot start because typically the EGT will start to run away from the N2. So if you're starting your engine and you see your EGT, you know, 400, 500, and your N2 is only at 20 or 30, you can pretty much guess that you're going to have a hot start. All right, we got our avail indication. He said that push is complete. Set brakes. Brakes set. Good start. Clear to disconnect. Show me the pin. Guys like to get fancy and say, oh, show me the pin on the left, show me the pin on the right. Fact of the matter is, whatever side the terminal is on, that's where the ground crew is going. So they're going to show you the pin wherever way they want to walk to the terminal. We have a good start on engine number 2. For sake of time, let's go ahead and run the after start procedure. So after start is back to normal. Speed brakes armed. Reset your rudder trim. Get rid of him. Flaps set for takeoff. We'll go ahead and turn our intercoms on. This would be, you know, obviously real world scenario. You want to be able to hear the other pilot. Intercom is on. Make sure our trim is set for takeoff. We have, like I said, we have a little different procedures. We'd have a trim number read back to us.
So is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal will be on the left. We'll see you next time. Have a safe flight.
Hand signal on the left, so he must be walking to the terminal. My experience, you know, if it's in the green, it's pretty much good to go, but we do follow a certain procedure for that. So let's see, just to go over that. Normal, armed, reset, flap set, intercom is on, trim is set. We go ahead and turn off the APU bleed and the master. And our tug driver is ramming the baggage cart driver. Pretty standard day here at Dallas-Fort Worth. He has the pin. Wow, that was a nice stutter. You can see this pin right here is actually very true to real life. That's a nose wheel steering disconnect pin. We want to make sure that the ground crew does remove that. If they don't, we will not be able to retract the landing gear. So that is very important. We do check for that. Now we can run an after start checklist. After start, engine anti-ice is off. Yellow electric pump is off. Rudder trim 0. After start check is complete. And be at this time, go ahead, taxi light on, and call for taxi. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll catch you on the next video.